Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. What happens when an entire city's lifeline, the millions of people delivering everything from your medicine to your midnight snack, suddenly finds the math of their own survival no longer adds up?
Yeah, that's exactly the question we have to ask today.
Right. Today, we are looking at the article titled China's Delivery Drivers and the Economics of the Gig Grind. And our goal for you today is to unpack the economic and labor market realities hiding right behind the conveniences of modern life.
Because we're really going to explore how an incredible oversupply of workers, intense algorithmic pressures, and, weak rule enforcement are just completely squeezing a vital workforce.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the macroeconomics at play, we need to start with the physical reality of the streets.
Well, the visual contrast between the center of these urban hubs and their peripheries lays the entire economic dynamic bare.
Yeah, it really does.
At the point of consumption, like the downtown office buildings, the high-end apartment complexes, the system looks like a triumph of hyper-modern efficiency.
It does. You see this constant, vibrant flow of delivery drivers on scooters, right? Just zipping through traffic in those bold, unmistakable colors.
Exactly. It's a sea of bright yellow, orange, and blue uniforms moving continuously, bearing hot food and retail goods straight to awaiting consumers.
It looks dynamic, almost frictionless. But when you follow those same bold colors away from the commercial centers and out into the distant industrial outskirts of these cities, the illusion just shatters.
It's a totally different world out there.
It really is.
Yeah.
Out in the sprawling urban villages where these drivers actually live, they are renting the absolute cheapest, most cramped rooms available.
Right. The vibrant tableau of the city center is replaced by these impossibly narrow alleys packed with battered scooters.
Yeah, the overriding image that sticks with you is seeing those matching brightly colored delivery jackets hanging from thousands of tiny windows to air out in the smog.
Yeah, because the defining color of their actual lives isn't the fluorescent yellow or orange of their uniforms. It is a profound, inescapable gray.
That gloom is really the overriding reality of their current economic situation.
It is. I mean, for a long time, the global promise of the gig economy actually held true here. Delivery work was a powerful magnet for rural strivers.
Because it offered a tangible alternative to the grueling, repetitive labor of a factory assembly line.
Right. You could hop on a scooter, hustle on your own schedule, and actually see a direct financial reward for your speed and efficiency.
It was a stepping stone, a way to build some capital. But that era is effectively over.
Oh, absolutely over. The realization setting in across this massive workforce is that this grueling gig might be as good as it gets, and the baseline for good is plummeting.
We are looking at a dramatic systemic collapse in wages.
Yeah, take the reality of a driver named Mr. Wu who navigates these streets in an orange jacket with tattooed arms. During a brief break in a really long shift, he breaks down the basic math of his survival.
It's pretty bleak, right?
Incredibly bleak. Just a short time ago, he was earning 7 yuan per order, which is roughly $1.
Okay, $1.
But today, his compensation for that exact same delivery, taking the exact same physical risks in traffic, has dropped to 4 yuan.
Wait, really? That's a near 50% pay cut, basically overnight.
Yeah. And once he factors in the fixed costs of his rent, the daily food to fuel 14-hour shifts, and the maintenance of a scooter, the margins just completely evaporate.
So the immediate question for you listening is, what forces act on the labor market to instantly devalue human effort so drastically?
Well, it requires a perfect storm of macroeconomic shifts, specifically a massive imbalance between supply and demand.
Let's try to map that out.
Oh, wow.
In 2022, when China's strict COVID restrictions finally lifted, the global expectation was a massive, roaring economic rebound.
Right. The assumption was that consumers, freed from lockdowns, would immediately start spending aggressively again.
But that engine just sputtered. Consumer confidence remained deeply shaken.
Sluggish consumer spending acts as the first structural pressure point. When middle-class households tighten their belts due to a shaky real estate market and, broader economic uncertainty, discretionary spending drops.
So they stop ordering premium meals from high-end restaurants.
Exactly. They order fewer items or they opt for the absolute cheapest available options. That softens the demand for delivery services significantly.
So the platforms are processing lower value orders, which means there is less revenue to pass down the chain to the courier.
That explains the shrinking demand. But the supply side is where the real squeeze happens.
Right.
The wider economic slowdown hasn't just hit white-collar consumers, it has devastated blue-collar industries. Millions of younger workers who would have traditionally found steady employment in construction, manufacturing, or heavy industry are suddenly out of options.
Those doors are closed, so they turn to the only door left open, the gig economy. The barrier to entry is almost non-existent. You just need a smartphone and a cheap rented scooter.
Which fundamentally alters the mechanics of the labor market. You no longer have platforms competing to attract drivers by offering competitive wages.
No. You have millions of desperate workers competing against each other for a shrinking pool of deliveries. It's kind of like a crowded theater with shrinking exits.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, millions of workers are pouring into the delivery gig space because other doors have closed, but the exit of consumer demand is getting narrower and narrower.
Right, and it functions almost exactly like a massive reverse auction. In a normal auction, buyers bid the price of an item up.
But in this gig economy reverse auction, millions of workers are forced to continuously underbid each other just to secure a single task.
Because the algorithm doesn't need to offer 7 yuan anymore. It knows mathematically that out of the millions of newly unemployed young people pouring into the system, someone will be desperate enough to accept 4 yuan.
And tomorrow they might accept 3.
Exactly. And because their fixed costs like rent, food, electricity do not drop alongside their wages, workers only have one mechanism to avoid starvation.
They must increase their volume. If you are paid half as much for delivery, you have to complete twice as many deliveries just to maintain your previous baseline of poverty.
Which is brutal. This necessity forces workers into an absolute physical grind, routinely pushing them into 14-hour days with 0 days off.
I mean, imagine navigating chaotic, high-speed, multi-lane urban traffic for 14 hours straight. In torrential rain, in freezing cold, in blistering heat.
It's almost unimaginable. But the physical exhaustion is only one layer. The psychological pressure is what truly breaks people down.
Because the pace of their 14-hour day is not dictated by traffic laws or human physical limits. It is dictated by an algorithm.
The algorithm is the invisible manager, and its sole directive is hyper-efficiency. It calculates route times based on ideal conditions and continuously learns.
So if a few drivers manage to shave 2 minutes off a specific route by cutting through a park or running a red light,
the algorithm establishes that new, dangerous speed as the baseline expectation for everyone else.
oh wow. And the punishment for failing to meet that machine-generated baseline is instant, and it's financial.
Yes, completely. If a driver is delayed by a sudden traffic jam, a flooded intersection, or an elevator breakdown in a massive apartment complex, the algorithm doesn't process context.
It simply registers a missed deadline and automatically deducts a penalty from that driver's already shrinking 4 yuan fee.
Right. The drivers are literally racing the clock to prevent their wages from being actively confiscated.
And the predictable consequence of an automated system that penalizes a worker's wallet for every minute they are late is that safety becomes an unaffordable luxury.
You cannot afford to wait at a red light if it means the resulting financial penalty will prevent you from making rent.
So the risk profile of the urban environment skyrockets because millions of people are financially incentivized to drive recklessly.
Exactly. Another driver, Mr. Gran, who delivers parcels in a blue uniform, puts this reality into stark perspective.
Yeah, his assessment of his daily life is completely fatalistic. He says, there is nothing more frightening than not being able to eat. Every morning when I wake up, it's not safety I think about, it's about earning enough.
That is the psychological endpoint of this economic model. The physiological need to secure a meal for today entirely eclipses the logical need to survive until tomorrow.
He has actively weighed the statistical probability of a catastrophic traffic collision against the absolute certainty of starvation or eviction.
And the algorithm has constructed an environment where gambling with his life is the only rational economic choice.
The sheer scale of this normalized risk is just hard to fathom. We are talking about an estimated 20 million delivery drivers woven into the fabric of these cities.
That is a workforce the size of the entire population of New York State.
All navigating the exact same high-stakes, low-reward algorithmic maze. They were the lifeline that kept cities functioning during lockdowns, and now they are so ubiquitous that their daily struggles are even inspiring films and podcasts.
Right. Yet despite being essential, the human cost is staggering. Surveys indicate that roughly a third of these 20 million drivers have suffered injuries on the job.
A third. That's incredible.
What's fascinating here is how clearly the architecture of the gig economy reveals its true priorities. The system structurally prioritizes algorithmic efficiency and consumer convenience over worker safety at every single turn.
Because the platform's ultimate client, the source of its revenue, is the consumer.
Therefore, the algorithm is optimized entirely to please that consumer. When disputes inevitably arise, a spilled soup, a late arrival, a misunderstood delivery instruction, the platforms almost universally side with the consumer.
Because the consumer holds the capital and the driver is economically replaceable.
Exactly. If one driver is deactivated due to a customer complaint, there are 10 more waiting to take their place.
But if a third of this massive workforce is getting injured while rushing to meet algorithmic demands, the obvious question is who pays for the medical bills?
Well, the statistics show that only a fifth of these drivers actually have insurance against workplace injuries.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If these massive e-commerce platforms are writing the code and dictating the deadlines, how do they legally wash their hands of the injuries?
It's wild, right? Because if I am wearing a company's brightly colored jacket and following their app's turn-by-turn directions, how am I not their employee? Because between the driver and the app on your phone lies a masterful, deeply cynical labyrinth of legal buffers. The platforms utilize what is essentially a massive contractor loophole.
Meaning what exactly?
These drivers are very rarely direct employees of the massive tech giants whose logos they wear. Instead, the platforms contract out the actual hiring to a sprawling network of third-party staffing firms and dispatch agencies.
So the tech giant just builds the software and a completely separate shell company technically hires the workforce.
Precisely. And often, those third-party agencies require the drivers to register themselves as independent contractors or micro-enterprises before they can take their first order.
Oh, wow. So this deliberate structural arrangement creates an impenetrable legal wall.
It leaves the multi-billion-dollar e-commerce platforms legally off the hook. Because the driver is classified as an independent contractor for a third-party agency, the platform is not required by law to provide medical insurance, pay into pension funds, or offer sick leave.
The legal liability is pushed relentlessly down the chain until it lands squarely and solely on the shoulders of the individual worker navigating traffic.
Right. They face extreme physical hazards with absolutely zero financial or medical buffer.
But with 20 million people operating under these conditions, it seems impossible that regulators wouldn't intervene. And there was a major push.
There was. Back in 2021, sweeping rules were introduced specifically targeting the gig economy. Regulators called for guaranteed minimum earnings.
And they explicitly demanded that platforms adjust their order dispatching algorithms to be more humane.
Yeah, and the use of the word humane by regulators is incredibly revealing. It is an official acknowledgement that the baseline state of the algorithm, if left unregulated, is fundamentally inhumane.
On paper, those 2021 guidelines appear to be exactly the intervention required to stabilize the workforce.
But the reality on the streets hasn't changed because the enforcement of those rules has been virtually non-existent.
We are seeing new measures being issued right now for gig workers, and they largely just restate the exact same directives from 2021.
Yeah, if regulators didn't enforce the mandate for minimum earnings 3 years ago, drivers have zero reason to believe they will enforce it today just because it's printed in a new memo.
Especially since local governments are dealing with their own economic slowdowns. They are desperate to maintain whatever corporate tax revenue and economic growth these massive tech platforms can generate.
So cracking down on the platform's labor models is simply not their priority. The lack of regulatory teeth allows the platforms to continue business as usual.
Right.
But there is a much deeper structural barrier trapping these workers, one that goes beyond corporate loopholes and algorithmic pressure.
You mean looking at who these drivers are demographically?
Yes. The vast majority of this workforce consists of migrants coming from the poorer, rural, inland parts of the country. They travel to these wealthy, bustling coastal urban centers seeking opportunity.
And this connects directly to the HUKU system, doesn't it? The household registration system that ties your social benefits to your birthplace.
Exactly. The HUKU system is the invisible cage around this entire labor market. Because these drivers migrate from rural provinces, they do not possess an urban HUKU, the official residency rights, for the megacities where they actually live and work.
And acquiring an urban HUKU is a notoriously difficult, highly bureaucratic process that favors the highly educated and wealthy.
Which means that legally, a migrant delivery driver from a rural village who has lived in Shanghai for 5 years is treated almost like a foreigner in their own country's city when it comes to social infrastructure.
That is the exact mechanism of their vulnerability. Because they lack local residency rights, they are structurally barred from accessing the city's heavily subsidized public hospitals if they get injured in one of those algorithmic-driven traffic accidents.
They cannot draw on local unemployment insurance if the gig work dries up. They cannot send their children to local public schools.
They are highly visible on the street, absolutely essential to the daily functioning of the urban economy, but they are complete ghosts within the social support system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how all these disparate forces interlock to create a perfect machine for suppressing wages indefinitely.
You have a macroeconomic slowdown that pushes an endless supply of desperate labor into the market.
You have algorithms precision engineered to extract maximum efficiency by leveraging that desperation.
You have a sprawling legal architecture of third-party contractors that shields platforms from any liability.
And finally, you have the hukuko system, which denies these workers any alternative safety net, ensuring they can never afford to stop working no matter how drastically their pay is cut.
It is a relentless, inescapable cycle. And it brings us right back down from the macroeconomic theory to the visceral human reality of the streets.
Yeah, it really is.
Think back to Mr. Guan, the driver in the blue uniform who wakes up worrying about starvation rather than traffic accidents. His day perfectly encapsulates the trap.
He finishes a cheap bowl of noodles and immediately heads back out onto his scooter for an evening shift.
Why? Because the algorithmic pay cuts, the drop from 7 yuan down to 4, meant his grueling daytime deliveries fell well short of the absolute minimum target he needs to survive.
Exactly. To simply break even, to make up for the wages the system has slowly siphoned away, he has no choice but to extend his exposure to risk.
He has to stay out past midnight, exhausted, navigating dark streets, hoping the algorithm randomly assigns him enough late-night orders to cover his rent.
And his assessment of that reality completely strips away the marketing gloss of the gig economy. He isn't out there past midnight because he loves the hustle or because he values being an independent entrepreneur.
Right, he says, the point is not that it's exhausting. There's just no other way.
No other way. That phrase destroys the illusion of choice. The gig economy promises flexibility and freedom, but when you strip away the safety net and flood the market with labor, that freedom weaponizes against the worker.
The flexibility becomes the freedom to work yourself to the bone or starve.
So true.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the mechanics of this system, it forces a profound recognition of the hidden architecture of convenience.
It really does.
Every single time you open an app to order a charger cable, a cup of coffee, or a hot dinner, you are not just executing a simple digital transaction, you are interacting directly with an incredibly complex, high-stakes labor market.
You are initiating a process that relies on a human being navigating a labyrinth of algorithmic threats, legal loopholes, and physical dangers, all while walking an economic tightrope without a safety net.
It radically shifts how we should view the modern metropolis.
And it leaves us with a critical lingering thought. If an entire urban economy is built on the assumption of cheap, instant delivery, fueled by an endless supply of desperate labor,
Right.
what happens to the fabric of the city when the physical limits of those workers are finally reached?
Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs, and don't forget to like, comment, and share.